On the
Okay.
estate side, like I said earlier, if you make a mistake in your AI drafted will or trust or your online will or trust, it may not be discovered till after you're dead. It's like placing a time bomb, go off after you're gone, and you won't see the damage it does, but it will create problems for your family.
Welcome to the Verdict Signal podcast, where we feature how top attorneys help people make informed choices, avoid common mistakes, and move forward with confidence. Now, enjoy the show, and here's your host.
Daniel Gao here. I'm the host of Verdict Signal, and today we're expanding our conversations to the experts who protect what people build, their careers, families, and businesses. I have Tim Ward, who has been practicing law for over 17 years. Almost all of his practice has been focused on estate planning, probate, and trust administration. However, many of his clients are business owners, so he's helped many of them with whatever legal needs they may have. So Tim, welcome and glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's start at the very top here, Tim. What got you interested in the legal field?
Oh, that's a long story. I'll summarize it. As a kid, I spent a lot of time biking around in the summers, and I'd go to the library a lot. And after a while, I got bored at the library and started going to the courthouse across the street. I grew up in New York, so I spent a lot of time watching trials as a middle schooler and thinking, this is what I want to do. So that was what got me started. Now, I had a 20-year distraction with music production and software engineering and technical writing for a medical device company, but I got back into law school later in life after I realized, oh yeah, I had that dream.
Okay. And so what led you to focus on estate planning, probate law, like that field of law?
Yeah, originally, as you know, with the software engineering background, medical device background, I thought I would go to law school and become more of a trademark or patent attorney and do more of that route. And that's why I went to law school. But then I got into law school and realized I'm starting another career. Is this really what I want to do? And I started looking at the classes I was taking, and I really gravitated towards the estate planning work. In many areas of law, you're kind of cleaning up messes, and something bad has happened, and the lawyers come in to try to clean it up. This was an area of law where people are planning, and it helps individuals. It doesn't help. Wasn't putting more money in the corporate coffers. It was helping individuals with their real life family issues. So I was really gravitated towards that.
Okay. And what's one thing that you wish more people understood about working with an attorney?
It's not as daunting as people expect. I know many people, they want to get through their life without having any interactions with attorneys, but it's not that bad. I mean, the attorneys are here to help you meet your goals, and sometimes you just wouldn't even know of various ways to do that unless you've met with somebody who's got the experience.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I think one thing, I don't know if this is a kind of a perception that you see in your clients or just in kind of regular people, but it seems like people don't necessarily understand that an attorney is their advocate. It's their representative, not
yes,
someone that's on the other side of the table trying to
yes,
fight you.
exactly. We're trying to help you. Everyone's got some idea in their head of what's going to happen when they're gone. Hopefully, they're thinking about that. And sure, you've got to manage the goals and make sure that you can meet your goals. But so much of that is dependent on the assets you have, whether it's the asset type or the quantity of assets you have. And it's also the family members, the people who are going to be playing a part in your plan. And it's not as simple as just saying, I'm going to assign my oldest child to all of my roles in my estate plan and leave everything to my children equally. That might be a general goal, but when you peel away the layers of the onion, you might find some things like one of your children has special needs and they're on government assistance. And if you left them an inheritance, they might lose their government assistance. So you have to be mindful of that. And meeting with an attorney, we can share that with you and share that expertise and teach you how to meet your goals the right way.
Okay. And what would you say some of the common situations that your clients come to you for? I'd imagine that some come to you because they really are planning ahead. I'm sure you get some where it's almost like, hey, I was kind of forced here by my spouse.
Yeah.
And then I'm sure you also have other situations where like everything's already on fire, and then you're kind of brought in to try and to try and reduce the fire or reduce the damage.
Yeah, if I love meeting with young couples, young couples that have children and they've got some serious acute needs. Because if you've got an infant, sure, you can have a plan. I'm going to leave everything to my child when I die. But if you die while they're a minor, well, how are they going to cash the check? They're too young. So that triggers all kinds of other issues, conservatorships and custodial accounts and universal transfer to minors act accounts. So working with young couples, I think is it's my favorite clientele, just because they're planning, they're just getting started in their professional lives. They got a long way to go, but they're thinking about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the other end of the spectrum are the people who haven't done an estate plan at all in their life, and now they're going into hospice and they're rapidly trying to put together an estate plan. But at that point, the runway for planning is really short, and you're just trying to remediate problems before they pass. So there's very little planning that can be done at that stage.
Okay. And then probate, I'm assuming, is basically when it gets to the point where, hey, there was no plan in place. Now that person has passed away. What do we do now?
Yeah, exactly. And in every state, they've got what's called intestacy laws. When somebody dies without a plan in place, where do the assets go? And if you're in a situation with blended families or something, you really need to be mindful of that, because your assets may not be going where you think they're going based on the laws of your state.
Okay. Now, what would you say are some of the most common misconceptions that people have? I mean, I think you kind of brought up some of them as far as like young couples, they want to pass everything over to their kid or kids, but if the kid is too young, then they have all these other issues with it. So like, what are some other common misconceptions? People are like, oh, I didn't realize that was a thing.
The single biggest misconception is I don't have an estate to worry about estate planning. And it's not about the volume of assets you have. It could be as simple as you just have a modest home. But if you don't have a plan for how that home is going to get to people after you're gone, then that's where we can come in. Another misconception, I would say, is I don't want to do an estate plan until I know exactly what I want my distribution plan to look like and who I want involved. And either as a beneficiary or to play a role in my plan, like trustee. Waiting for everything to be perfect before taking the first step. I'm a big proponent of just reminding people that these are just Word documents. I'm drafting in Microsoft Word, and we can modify them anytime they need to down the road. As the kids age, as life changes, maybe one of their children gets divorced. There's estate planning is not a one and done situation. It's just get something out there that works for today and meets your goals, and then revisit it every now and then, especially when things change in your life.
Okay. And as an offshoot off of that question, how, I guess I'm sure you also get some clients where their perception is that, well, I mean, I have certain assets now, but what do I do when my assets change over time? Maybe I'm investing a lot. Maybe I'm going to buy another house. Maybe I'm going to do this or this or this or this. So how would you handle it for a client when their assets may be going up or down? Hopefully it's always up, but maybe going up and down kind of over time, over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. You mentioned that you can change it, but like, how should they have, what mindset should they have when they kind of go into it with that in mind?
A few things there. Number one, if they've got the same accounts and we've done the planning work to make sure that that account gets to the people it's supposed to get to, whether through trust or directly through beneficiary designations, then if that account grows, then great, but that shouldn't impact how it gets distributed. It's still going to go to the beneficiaries. But as accounts grow, then you could be looking at an estate that exceeds the estate tax exemption in your state, if there is an estate tax in your state. I am in Minnesota, and we have a $3 million exemption. So if somebody's assets, their net worth grows from 2 million to 4 million over 10, 20 years, now they have a tax concern. And that might change the way we would plan. because now we want to look at how can we minimize or avoid any estate taxation if we can.
Okay. Now, what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes people make before they call a lawyer?
They start the do-it-yourself estate planning work. They'll put their child on as a joint owner of their checking account, or they'll transfer a house to children and not really understand the implications of what could happen. For instance, if you put your child on as a joint owner of your bank account and that child's married, and then later that child or spouse files for divorce, your joint bank account is possibly caught up in their divorce proceeding.
Wow.
So that's a very risky proposition. In some situations, I would recommend it. In others, I wouldn't. Most I wouldn't.
Wow.
And then same with the home transfers. A lot of people will transfer homes using a deed that they found online, and they fill it out themselves, and then they submit it, and it gets recorded. Now it's official. But it's not effectively transferring the asset as they intended, because maybe they didn't understand their ownership model in the first place. A classic conundrum is the joint tenancy, where maybe a husband and wife own their home together. If it's joint tenancy with rights of survivorship in Minnesota, then when the first spouse dies, the second spouse owns the entire home. But if it's kind of a joint tenancy that we call tenants in common, then each spouse owns 50% of the home. And when the first spouse dies, the surviving spouse still only owns 50% of the home. Now, they have an equitable interest in the other 50% being a spouse, but it's that kind of cleanup of the paperwork that is what we're here for, to make sure that we're doing it right and make sure that we've got things titled properly. And that's the kind of service you'll get from an estate planning attorney.
Okay. And you kind of mentioned as far as doing, like, one of the mistakes is the do it yourself, but also what about kind of building on top of that using AI? It's like, hey, ChatGPT, create a estate plan for me, and then they just kind of use that. Like, what's the dangers of them doing that?
Well, I think that the biggest risk is to think about the risk versus impact. I think AI is getting so much better. It's got a long ways to go, but you are putting all of your eggs, all of your assets into that basket, which requires an awful lot of faith if you're going to use AI. And you won't know that it's not working properly until after it's too late to change anything. And then it'll be a problem on the back end during the administration process. So even if you're going to use something like an online tool, AI, whatever, I would strongly recommend at least have your documents reviewed by an experienced estate planning attorney who can find gaps or holes in the estate plan or contradictions. I've seen that before, where there's one paragraph somewhere in this trust or will that says what assets do, where they go, and then there's another paragraph that contradicts it. It's how does that get reconciled? So yeah, I think if you're going to put a lot of faith in the technology, at least double check it, or have somebody who's experienced double check it.
Okay. Now, we talked about some of the mistakes people make before they call a lawyer, but what are some, on the kind of the flip side of that, what are some smart first steps that they can take, either before they call a lawyer or as soon as they start working with a lawyer?
Sure. Mistake number one is waiting too long. If we are estate planning attorneys, so if you give us a long enough runway to do some planning, we're there for you. We can help you. So don't wait too long. So get in and at least get something put together that can be revised later as life changes. After you've met with the attorney, some of the common mistakes people make is the big one that frustrates me to no end is they don't tell me about all their assets. You know, I like to think of estate planning as like putting together a puzzle. You as the client know what the picture should be and what's your vision, what's on the front cover picture, and then you're handing me all this information, which are the puzzle pieces, all the people in your life, the dynamics of the family members, who's going to get the benefit of this asset or that asset, and then understanding the assets themselves. So it's kind of a three-pronged approach of what are your goals, who are the people, and what are the assets. And if I have all that information, I'm going to try to make the picture as close as I can that you have in your mind. But sometimes I have to tell you that these puzzle pieces won't make that picture. And then we have some conversations about what pictures we can make, what goals can we meet with the assets and the people and the situations that you have. So it's kind of, we need all of that information. But when I don't get that information and then it comes out later that they had a cabin somewhere up north, well, there was an opportunity lost. And that's going to be a problem. And it could go to probate and go through the court process.
Wow.
And I'd like to know about that up front so that we avoid that on the back end.
Okay. Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about trust, and because I know you do trust administration. For people who have no idea, what is a trust? And I guess what's the purpose of this as well?
The trust is a legal agreement where you can put assets in it. Think of it like a bowl. The attorney drafts this trust and it's just an empty bowl. But now you can put assets in the trust, owned by the trust, or you can use beneficiaries to drive assets to the trust upon your death. So think of life insurance. You've got a beneficiary on it. Maybe you've got your spouse or your children as beneficiaries. If you're going to use a trust, you'll probably change that beneficiary to be the trust so that when you die, the life insurance proceeds go to the trust. Then once all the assets are in the trust, then it distributes the trust assets according to the agreement. And you get to plan that. You get to write that during your life. You can revise it if it's a revocable trust, and it gives you great flexibility. One huge advantage of a trust, or several huge advantages, but one of them is if you've got young children, back to that discussion, if you don't use a trust, those children are going to get the entirety of your estate upon a birthday, whether it's their 18th or 21st, just depends on state laws. But that could be too much for an 18-year-old to handle. So with a trust, you can stage those payments out over time and say, on your 21st birthday, we'll give you 10% of the trust principal. On your 25th birthday, we'll give you 30% of the trust principal. And on your 30th birthday, we'll give you the remainder of the trust balance. That way you stage that money out over time, and you can do a little parenting from the grave too, while you're making sure that your children don't squander their inheritance.
Okay. Okay. And is it typically the lawyer that's like the one who's the administrator of the trust, like basically the one that's kind of fulfilling the will of the person, or not always, or how does that
Not
work?
always. It's often it's family members or it's a professional trustee. Occasionally, I, as the drafting attorney, might offer my services as trustee, but I have no intentions of being a trustee for a child who's about to be born, and the trust is going to last until they're 30 or 40 years old. I will not be practicing in 30 years. So I will not take on trustee work for that kind of trust. But if it's a simple, when somebody dies, we just collect the assets, distribute everything immediately, then I would probably volunteer. If they don't have anybody in mind, I would volunteer my services.
Okay, got it. Now, when it comes to, let's say someone is looking for help from a lawyer, whether doing estate planning or whether it's probate or whatever it is, but they've never worked with an attorney before, they don't know who to choose. What's the most important piece of advice you can give to this person so they can find that lawyer that they feel comfortable with, who has experience, the knowledge, and can really help them get the end result they're looking for?
Yep. The personality is critical, as well as their experience. So I would always recommend, if you're looking for an attorney online to help you with estate planning or wills or trusts or powers of attorney, you make sure that you're finding the attorneys who do this work. There might be attorneys who do general practice, but they aren't really in depth in any of them. So you really want to focus on somebody who's got some estate planning experience and is aware of the tax laws and trust laws and can help you the best way possible. Now, even then, you might not fit with their personality. And I would say this for financial planners as well. You got to find somebody that you enjoy working with who's also qualified. So the qualification is your baseline. And then if you find somebody you actually enjoy working with, then that's just gravy.
Okay. Okay. So it is important to have kind of both those components to it, but you would probably say ability is and experience is probably going to be a little bit more of the weighing factor.
Correct. I would say so because when you think about the entirety of your assets over your life, hopefully you've accumulated a fair amount.
Mhm.
And are you willing to risk that because
Mhm.
you liked somebody's personality?
Mhm.
Yeah, I would go with the experience over the personality first.
Okay.
But there's plenty of attorneys out there. And if one doesn't mesh with you, seek another one. There's so many estate planning attorneys, or I'm in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. There's many, many of us. So it's just a matter of finding the right one that meshes with you.
Okay. Okay. Now with the probate side, I did want to touch on the probate
Mhm.
side because I think that this is almost like the building's on fire, we need help kind of situation. So it's probably
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's not ideal. But what are some things that I guess people just need to be aware of if they ever get to this point? I mean, at this point it's too late for the planning, but I mean, is there anything that you would kind of advise to them to try and ease the pain going through a situation like this?
sure. The first thing that with a probate, you just have to be patient. It's a very slow process because you're in the court systems and you're on the court calendar. So it might take months just to get in front of the court to have your initial hearing. And even at that hearing, they've got 90 days in Minnesota to sign the orders that come out of that. So it's just an exercise in patience to the clients. If we could get the planning done ahead of time, then we could avoid the probate court process possibly. But if you can't avoid the probate court process, then just accept that and be patient and know that it's just going to take time.
Okay. Now, I'm sure that when it comes to you working with your clients, setting the expectations is so critical.
Yes.
So, how do you approach that? Like, how do you approach setting the expectations so that your clients feel informed, they feel supported, but more important, like we talked a little bit earlier on, as far as like that trust, like they really need to tell you everything because you're their representative, you're there to support them, not to fight
Yep.
against them. So, how do
Yep.
you approach that?
I like to just do the analysis, give them the information, and let them decide. It's so much a game of you can fix one problem by creating another, and it's just which problems can you live with and which problems can you not live with. And if it's you have to kind of take a little bit of all of them, how can we keep them as minimized as possible? Taxes are a good example. You can go out of your way to avoid income tax issues and then create an estate tax issue, or vice versa. So it's just how do you bring down your exposure to these taxes to a point that's of moderate risk that you're willing to accept, and that might mean a little bit of tax, estate tax exposure, and a little bit of capital gains income tax exposure. Just depends on the situation.
Okay.
On the probate side, managing expectations is more challenging because when somebody's passed away, family members are often very anxious to get going on things, and they just want to drive the execution of the administration. And it just you can't drive it any faster than the court is willing to let you go. So it creates a lot of tension with the family members.
Man, okay. Now, Tim, I'm sure that throughout your experience, you've had some memorable cases, maybe even some challenging cases that you worked on. Is there maybe one story that you're able to share of just one of those cases and really how you were able to get them a successful outcome in the end?
Sure. I'm thinking of a few cases. I think my favorite cases are the ones that go so smoothly that you don't even know that a problem was avoided because everything worked out so well. But I had a case many years ago where there was a Medicaid issue with the client. She had more in medical assistance, is what we call Medicaid in Minnesota. She had more in medical assistance claims than she had in the value of her estate. So the state was underwater, and there was no way that there was only one heir. There's no way the heir was going to get paid anything unless we worked with the county on eliminating or minimizing that debt. The county refused to work with us at all, wouldn't even repay the client if the client were to hire me to do the probate. So that was the one time I told a probate client, walk away, just don't do anything. Your mother's house is just going to get absorbed by the county to repay her medical assistance debts. And the county wasn't willing to reimburse him for his transportation from Texas to Minnesota, wasn't willing to reimburse him for processing the probate, doing the work there, wasn't willing to reimburse him for the attorney's fees. So I told him, just don't do anything, walk away. That was a hard one because no family member wants to hear, just walk away.
Yeah. Well, sometimes some fights you're better off walking away from, not fighting.
Yep.
Wow.
And there was no point in having him spend money knowing he wasn't going to get anything on the back end.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Now, Tim, where do you think the future of estate law is going? I mean, really, is there any change that people need to be aware of or kind of pay attention to?
The laws tend to change slowly in probate and trust areas and planning itself. However, we're always looking at tax changes. So whether it's state or federal income tax or estate tax, we're always looking at those changes in the laws because they do change somewhat frequently. At least here in Minnesota, they have. Mm-hmm. I think the other big wave that we're waiting to see what happens is AI. Mm-hmm. Within the law firm, there might be some efficiencies using AI, but it's a faith factor. If you're going to use AI, proponent always double check everything because it's new technology, mm-hmm. and you do your due diligence to make sure it's doing what you think it's doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. On the estate side, like I said earlier, if you make a mistake in your AI drafted will or trust or your online will or trust, it may not be discovered till after you're dead. Mm. And then the problem
by then.
It's like placing a time bomb.
Yeah.
It go off after you're gone, and you won't see the damage it does, but it will create problems for your family.
Wow. Okay. So, Tim, I do have one last question for you, but before I ask it, I want to point people to your website at mpkennedylaw.com.
Thank you.
Now, last question is, what does peace of mind mean to you?
Well, I think I mentioned this earlier. Peace of mind for me is knowing that my estate planning clients have an easy administration after the death of a loved one. I get great joy when somebody tells me, my mother died and you did her estate plan and everything went seamlessly. And it allowed us the time to grieve. And we didn't have to get caught up in the administration and the chaos of probate. Everything just transferred naturally without any issues. That is a huge win for me because that's what they should be doing when a loved one dies, is get through the grief and not through the asset allocations and where they go. Let that happen with proper planning.
Okay, well said. Well, there you have it. Tim sharing his expertise. So, Tim, where can people contact you and your practice?
Sure. They can. I'm in Eagan, Minnesota with Kennedy and Rusum Law Office, and they can contact me at my direct line, 651-360-1028, or they can contact me on my cell phone, 612-751-7519.
Awesome. Okay. Well, Tim, this is great. Thank you for coming on, and thanks for sharing your experience.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Verdict Signal podcast. Any questions? Please contact the practice directly with the contact information provided during the show. We'll see you again next time. Bye for now.